And we are live. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to FAB Expat Services. Wonderful how to live in France long term. I'm your host this evening. Pleasure. My name is Ben Small. I've been helping expats move to France and move money to and from France for the best part of 8 years now. It's my real pleasure, actually, to bring two very experienced panelists to the stage. We've got Fabien Pelissier, founder of FAB Expat Services, and Nannie Bellanger, part of his insurance team, real expert there. And we're going to be digging deep. Two main objectives for this evening. The first one being to show how to make a move to France sustainably. What's the key things to think about? But also part of the advantage of these things, we had 550 signups for this event. So it just goes to show you're not the only ones asking these questions. You're not the only ones thirsty for more information on how to make this possible. You're definitely asking the right questions, and there's a whole community out there to help. Fabien and Nannie are leaders of them. So I'll just bring them to the stage now. Fabien, if I could ask you to introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone, and thanks, everyone, for attending. Thanks, Ben, for the amazing introduction. It's hard to speak after that. I'm Fabien, as Ben already told you. I'm the founder and managing director of FAB Expat Services and FAB French Insurance. So we've been helping the English-speaking community moving or relocating to France since 2015. Basically, we're mostly working with British and American expats. However, we're also working with tons of other English-speaking nationalities. Everyone's welcome, South African, Australian. We probably have seen tons of applications. We're doing more than 1,000 visas each year. But the goal is to make sure we help you move across as simply as Frenchly possible.
Good intro there, Fabien. I like the added as Frenchly as possible too. It's an important dynamic. Expectations are different from one country to the next. So we'll talk into that. Nannie, come to the stage.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name's Nannie. I'm an American living in France since 1999, and I joined the FAB French team a little over a year ago. I'm the Swiss Army knife for everything from car insurance to home insurance to business insurance and health insurance. And my goal here is to make everyone make it as the least painful as possible.
We like least painful. We really do.
It's better.
And hopefully you guys are getting some good perspective there, because we've got pure Frenchman in Fabien, who's got great experience and great connections locally in France. Nannie, who's been in France for such a long time, over 2 decades. Lots has changed over that period, and we're going to be getting Nannie's perspective throughout this. And lots will change moving forward too. So hopefully you're going to find all these things insightful. We've just got lots of good angles to go from. Now, back to the main theme of this, moving to France long term. Hopefully everyone in attendance on this webinar this evening is looking to get to France for a long and good time, and not just a short splash in Paris. This is something far more sustainable. Fabien, before we jumped on this earlier, you mentioned something about the 3 main tests. What is required for people looking to move to France long term?
Sure. Yeah. So first, most of you guys probably will require a visa if you want to consider being in France for more than 90 days. So there is that rule that we can dig a bit deeper later on, but there is a 90 days every 180-day rule. So that means from basically most countries that France have agreements with, you're allowed to come to France for up to 90 days every 180 days, then without a visa. But if you want to exceed that period, then you may require a visa. And there are basically 2 types of visas in France. Only one is renewable. And so there is the long-term temporary visa, which is a 6-month visa. Not the type of visa we very often advise. It's definitely not a Swiss Army knife. And there is the long-term visa. Well, technically, there are 2 types of renewable visa. There is the passport talent, which is kind of a multi-year visa. This is how I see it. And there is the VLSTS, which is kind of the holy grail. This is the Swiss Army knife visa. It's a 12-month visa. It's renewable. That's usually the kind of visa you'll be applying for if you want to stay in France long term, at least for the first. I mean, it starts with the visa, and then we'll see what happens next a bit later this evening. For those who are watching in Europe, for those lucky who are in San Francisco, they're probably having a coffee right now. But so for the long-term visa, there are three main pillars, or three main tests. Whatever the type of visa, because that visa comes in different flavors, as I like to call it. Like there is like the retiree visa or retirement visa, which is called the visitor visa, because this is France. We want to have confusing wording. Otherwise, it's not funny. But so there is a visitor visa. You can have a work visa, a business visa. Well, there are plenty of fragrance. And so most of the time, for guys who want to retire, having a sabbatical, or simply not working in France, having a good time there, it's going to be the visitor visa most of the time. But again, plenty of other situations. So, but all the visas, no matter the type of visa, you'll have to go through three main pillars. These pillars are, so first, the most obvious one is you need to have a French permanent address. So that's a pillar that they call the proof of address. So Airbnb is not going to cut it. An hotel arrangement is not going to meet the requirements as well. It has to be a French long-term rental agreement, which is very, very often a 12-month contract. But don't be scared by that, because the landlord do have a commitment towards you if you're a renter in France. But you, on the other end, as a tenant, you can basically change either your accommodation or properties, just giving a month notice. So, but this is required to have like a long-term contract, or obviously that the most, the holy grail of having an address in France is to have your own property. So proof of ownership of a property, which is very easy. The French solicitor, which we call the notaire, will provide you with a certificate, an acte de vente authentique, which is a proof of ownership. But you need a proof of address. Okay, this is required. They want to make sure you will not end up being homeless, basically. That makes sense. The second pillar is a proof of income, which can be substituted with savings. So it could be either or a mix of both. But basically, you need to meet France minimum wage, which is, I'm just rounding up the numbers, but basically at €2, it's 1,400 a month net. And then if you're applying as a couple, there are discounts. So it's basically you had a 30% per dependents. So, it's not 2 times the minimum wage. But that's basically what you're looking at. And if you don't have that, or if you don't have income or dividends or whatever, because it could be anything, then you can switch for savings. And then savings, well, you basically need 12 times the minimum wage, the monthly wage. Obviously, you're probably going to have, most of the time people are applying with savings. And we just advise just to be on the safe side, because most of the time the savings are in a foreign currency, might be in GBP, might be in US dollars. So we advise that you leave a bit of a margin there to cope for currency exchange rates and all. So ideally, I often advise 20 to 25,000 so for a single person, and 30,000 as a couple, just to be on the safe side to cope for currency risks.
On that, Fabien, actually, how close is that line? So when you go to making applications for visas, can you?
In theory, this is a strict line. Okay. As long as you meet the requirement, they'll be happy with it.
Yeah.
But there is a bit of an appreciation, and obviously, if you meet the requirement like strict, and then just that day, obviously it never happens, but just that day, the currency rate drops by 5%, then you're short.
Yeah. Be ashamed to miss out on the visa just for that, right? Okay.
Yeah, well, and honestly, don't be afraid about that, because it's perfectly acceptable. Well, it's not a one jack fits it all, but it's perfectly acceptable if you have the money put in. Oh, well, something I didn't mention is very important about savings. The money needs to be available like straight away. Like if I ask you to wire the money like right now, it needs to. So if it's invested in a saving account or if it's part of a, I don't know, like a real estate portfolio, whatever, this would not be accepted. So you could be a multimillionaire, but having no direct available savings, they'll say you're not eligible. So, but you can draw down from your savings to have the money available for the day and show them.
Yeah, they need to see that it's liquid, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But they need to see two things actually. They need to see it's liquid, and they need to see it's also active. So, if you're opening up a bank account, like you're opening up a bank account in a Eurozone, and then you draw down from, I don't know, a saving account, let's say, and you wire the money there, and you use that. If you go at the appointment with a blank bank statement, which only shows that wire, they'll be like, what are you doing? I mean, where the money comes from, and what do you intend to do with that money? So because it looks suspicious. So don't oversell it. You just use your own bank account, the one you use for grocery runs, the usual bank account, and you draw down the money there, and they can see the money is there. They'll be happy because it's a live bank account, and they see you really are using that bank account and you have the money, so it's legit in a way.
Yeah, sure. Actually, I had this bit of housekeeping. Marianne, who's moderating this, will be very disappointed with me. I should have mentioned this right at the start because we have got questions coming through. Guys, we're going to save these right at the end because I think it'd be a good, efficient way to handle it. Sorry, Marianne, for forgetting that. But so you mentioned 2 points there, and I'm getting a theme of planning, really planning ahead for this and making sure you got the right documents. What was the third main test?
So the third and last pillar is the proof of medical coverage. So it's not always a proof of medical coverage, but basically same as all the other twos, because the first two are about, well, you not being homeless if you come to France. You need to have an address and to prove that you're making enough to be sustainable, to sustain yourself in France. And the third pillar is that the proof of medical coverage. When you move to France as a non-European, because, well, I didn't mention this, but obviously we're considering the regulations for non-Europeans. I want to move across. And if you're non-European, so you're living abroad, you're not in your home country, so you're not covered by your country, and you're not yet covered by France as well. We'll get into this later on, but so, eventually you'll be part of the French system, but at first, and most of the time for the first 9 to 10 months, you're not covered. So basically, you're not covered by anyone. Well, you could have travel insurance and all, but travel insurance is voided in your country of residency. So if you've made the move and have a French permanent visa, then this is your country of residency. So you're not covered there.
Gosh.
Yeah. That's why
people must make that mistake all the time. I definitely would. Actually,
the insurance policy, the insurance certificate is the reason for the overwhelming majority of visa. Well, I don't like the word rejection because it's let's be honest, it's never really a rejection. Most of the time, they're like the guys at the TLS center in the UK or VFS in the US, and in other countries, it's also VFS very often. They're usually super friendly. So it's never a hard rejection. They're like, okay, this is not compliant. You should provide us with a compliant policy, or that documentation doesn't fit the bill. Please resend something else. You have a week to do it, or a couple of weeks. So they'll let you fix the problem, but you probably don't want to end up in that situation anyway. It's probably it's better to
anyone who's had the TLS experience, they are friendly. You're right; they are very welcoming. But you get there and you get one thing wrong, and they're like, "Oh, don't worry. You can book this meeting again, and you've got to go all the way to."
So sometimes they allow you to just resubmit the documentation. You don't have to go there again. But sometimes they're like, "Okay, then you'll need to book another appointment." So you could postpone the initially intended start date and things like that. So, So that's what I'm saying. It's a reason for the initial application to not really be rejected, but not be accepted straight away.
Yeah, sure.
And the main reason for that, so the application not being accepted straight away, is the visa policy. Because many people, they have a BUPA insurance policy, for example, which is super comprehensive, but do come with an excess, and that's not compliant, for example. So BUPA is a fantastic insurance company, and you may be paying thousands of pounds each month with a top-notch insurance policy.
Yeah.
And the French government would be like, no, that's not going to.
I bet there's such a regular assumption to make.
And it works on both ends of the spectrum. So sometimes you have very cheap policies like travel insurance, Schengen insurance policies that they're not compliant, so that they're rejected. And they also ask for a proof of payment. So with the payment as well, sometimes it kind of tips them, onto the problem, because if they see you've paid 500 euros, they're like, it doesn't look like private medical insurance. So but to get back to the issue, so private medical insurance is required because you're not covered in France, and the French government wants to make sure that in case, I don't know, you're being hit by a bus, or you end up in the ER, or something catastrophic happens, then you would not end up being a burden to the state.
Right. Okay. Yeah, you can see why it's there. You can see why it's in place, right? But
the good news is, once you're part of the French system, and then you'll apply for residency instead of a visa. So then you can use Social Security plus something we call the mutual, which is top-up health insurance, and you no longer need a private medical insurance. So for the vast majority of you guys considering the move, you probably will only need the private medical insurance for the first year.
Right.
So it's actually a good news. And cherry on the pie, there is some post-Brexit agreements which end up not being a mess. So not everything, not everything went down.
Really?
So, so for British pensioners, so those who reach like 66, 67 years old, which are eligible to the British state pension, okay. They also have access to something called the S1 program. So it's Brits specific. It's not available for Americans or any other guys. It's only for the Brits, and it's only if you have state pension. But if you have that, then you can trigger something called the S1 program, which basically you can substitute this to private health insurance. It's basically the NHS saying, okay, we'll pay for this guy when he's in France.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But if we go down the rabbit hole, it's actually a bit more tricky, because it's not the NHS saying we'll pay for this guy. You've lived in the UK all your life, you've contributed to social taxes in the UK, and then you've built like a money pot in the UK. Okay, that money pot is being transferred to France. That means you're also opting yourself out of the NHS. So if you want to move back, well, then you need to you'd be like me, basically.
Wow, right, okay.
So it is a decision to consider, just to save 1 year of premium the first year. But at least you'd have a choice. That's what I mean.
There's the options there, right? Okay.
So these are the three main tests. And, I won't dig too much and too deep into what's required for a medical policy to be compliant, but just to brush out the issue very quickly, you need to have something comprehensive. So in and outpatient benefits, a certain level of coverage, like 30,000 euros minimum. In some places, New York, London, they expect to see 100,000. They probably think the guys there are posher or wealthier. I don't know. This is super legal. I don't know. But this is, this is the government in a way. So this is the way it is. You need to have a repatriation. Repatriation needs to be an option on the policy. No excess, no deductible, no copay, no co-insurance, whatever you call it all across the globe. Nothing like that. It should be from the first euro, as we call it in France. And no medical exclusion should be visible. I insist on the visible bit, because it's kind of, it's a play of hide and seek. They kind of know that it's impossible if you've had a heart attack, or I don't know, you have stage 3 or 4 cancer. Everyone knows it's not possible to cover that privately. But as long as it's not disclosed on the certificate of insurance you're using for the policy, they'll be happy with it. But so that's why my advice for this, obviously I would say, work with us, guys, and you'll be fine. We have a 100% acceptance rate. But joke aside, even if you don't end up working with us, just make sure you're working with someone that has been doing this for, countless of times, and can actually say, we guarantee this could be accepted for visa application. Or, for example, us, it's either you're accepted or we refund you 100%, like 100% money back guarantee, and that's it. But make sure you're working with people that do the same kind of deals, because they're confident that the plans they're selling is French visa compliant because we have French specific requirements. That's it.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think it's a very good point. And the reality is, we can all log on to the forums online and follow the government's guidance, but I think it does just the experience of knowing exactly what's needed to get the ball over the line, as they say, is pretty important in this scenario. I mean, I'd like to challenge you a little bit further, Fabien, if I could, on this, because we are talking about how to live in France long term and not just get people through the door on a 1-year visa. So, what should people be thinking about? They're saying, Fabien, look, I know my chips are in France now. We're going all in. What does a long-term view?
Congratulations and welcome on board.
Yeah,
we love to see you around. And if you're living nearby, come grab a beer or a cup of coffee, depends on the time of the day.
It's nice down where you are as well. So
yeah, well, Nannie and I and Marion, we're in the southwest of France, best part of France, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
But you're right. So actually, this is a very, very interesting question and point you're making, because very often you're scared about getting through the doors. Obviously, the visa is the first administrative step you encounter along the way, and this is the one you're the most scared of, because you're like, what if I'm not accepted and all? So okay, most of the time, especially if it's a visitor visa, the acceptance rate is super high. The problem is, I'll just take an example. You've used savings, like you had 30,000 euros when you applied for your visa. That was easy. But then you've lived through that year in France, and then comes the time for renewal or extending your visa. I'll get to this. But you've burned some of that money away. And they'll ask for the requirement again. They'll double check that you still meet the requirement. So what are you going to do now? So this is why it's important to consider your plan on a multi-year basis, and not just think, okay, I meet the criteria right now. But also think, will you still meet the criteria in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, etc. So, well, most of the time, I'm not playing a scaremonger here. I mean, it's the fearmonger. Sorry, it's most of the time everyone's fine. We've never seen someone being kicked out of France.
Okay.
However, this is because people are planning ahead. So it's important. But so what happens is, it's actually the exact same process. For the visa, there is an application window. You need to apply, as early as 90 days ahead. But if you apply, like if you're 6 months ahead of your intended relocation date, you're too early. They will not process your application. You have to be at least 3 months ahead, so 90 days ahead. But you shouldn't apply if you're less than 30 days ahead as well, because otherwise then you're too late. Okay, so the application window is like 90 to 30 days. That's the application window.
It's a really good point, Fabien. Actually, I interrupt you on that, because I know plenty of people will follow the things online, book these appointments in to get the application going. There's nothing on the website that will say you're too early or you're too late, right?
They just will not process it. I mean, you sometimes don't understand, but it's like, obviously the system is locked because you're either too soon or too late. Yeah. Should
be. Sorry, I cut you.
Yeah, no. That's actually a very good point. And so yes, and once you've so that's the exact same process for residency then.
Okay.
Because for residency, then once you're 9 months into your French relocation, you become eligible to. I like to refer to this as a residency permit, but in France, this is a carte de séjour.
Mm-hmm.
I like to say that as the residency permit. And this is where usually, the first year's carte de séjour, once you've had it once, renewing it is a walk in the park.
Okay.
But the switch so I like to call this the conversion from the visa to the residency permit is very often the most tricky bit, because at this stage, you're no longer dealing with a private subcontractor, which is actually American or British. If you're in the US, you'd be dealing with fellow Americans. If you're in the UK, you're dealing with fellow Brits. So you're dealing with guys that understand you.
Sure.
They speak your language, I understand you. But when it comes to the residency application, just a quick note, mastering the French language is never required. They don't ask for anything. But obviously now you're in France, so you'll be dealing with the French authorities instead of a private subcontractor in the UK or in the US.
Okay.
or elsewhere. And therefore, these guys may or may not be friendly. Then it depends. You're dealing with some a French an admin structure called the prefecture. Okay, so you'll be dealing with the local prefecture in your area. And these guys, sometimes they're friendly, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're super busy, sometimes they're not. It depends on where you're applying, where you're applying. There's so many factors. And these guys, they have the power. They can decide to not give you the residency permit. They can decide to give you a 1 year's permit, a multiple years permit, or a permanent permit straight away if they want.
Wow. Modern day gods.
Yeah, exactly. They have that power. Well, to be fair, you will never get a permanent permit straight away. Let's clear that out. Okay. But I mean, I'm just saying that if they wanted to, they could grant you. So what they're doing is you're dealing with someone now at this stage that is kind of assessing how French you look. Not your appearance, don't worry. Not the language, don't worry as well. But what you've done to be part of the French system. So that's why during that first year, there are plenty of things that you could or could not do. Many aren't mandatory. Applying for a tax code, for example, converting your driver license, applying to French Social Security. Well, although this one is kind of mandatory, and I'll get to this point. And tons of things like that. If you have a vehicle, make sure you've imported it. They'll make sure of all those small bits and pieces here and then. And the whole thing will build a picture of yourself, like how French you've become. Do you have a French bank account? Things like that. So all combined, you'll have like a residency score, like the credit score for residency.
Yeah. Okay.
So it doesn't exist, I've just made it up. But it's just, it's kind of, they're building that picture in their mind. Like, okay, how does that look? How do you look? And if you look good, French-wise, well then, they'll tell you, okay, well, no problem, residency permit granted, or a couple years permit if you're renewing it, or 3 years permit, so then they can be more or less flexible. Okay.
Got you. Okay.
Many things, again, aren't mandatory. And even if you've done nothing, that doesn't mean you'll be rejected. Again, not being the fearmonger.
Yeah.
It's just that, obviously, you probably want to make sure you maximize your odds to get through that second tests.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So then, you can apply between 9 and 11 months once you're into France. So again, 90 to 30 days ahead of the visa expiry date this time.
Okay. Yeah.
But there is one thing which is almost, it's not always, but almost always a rejection for a residency application. That's the French Social Security number. If you failed to secure a French Social Security number by the time it comes to the residency application, odds are very high. Again, not always, but odds are very high that they'll say, okay, well, go back to your home country and reapply for another visa, because there is no such thing as extending a visa. You need to go back to your country to reapply, which obviously if you're in the UK, that's not a great news, but that might be acceptable. If you're from the US, for example, or Australia, South Africa, you're like, especially if you're from the East Coast or the West Coast, or even worse. Yeah. Do you want to have to go through the round trip just to renew your damn visa?
Nightmares.
Yeah. So that's what applying, again, all of these troubles can be avoided if you've just planned ahead of that relocation. So the things for me that are really mandatory is to apply for CPAM after 90 days, or should be for you. Like as soon, because you have to wait 90 days. There is a cool-off period. You cannot apply for the first 90 days. But as soon as you become eligible, or you should be applying like straight away to make sure, because the application time usually, it varies. It's the same as every other processes in France. It varies massively, but you're looking at a 6-month-ish application process. So if you do the math, 3 months, 6 months, you're like 9 months. So, you're barely making it already. So.
Yeah. Even with the best timing, it still feels a bit touch and go. Okay.
So that's why this is something important to consider. But the good news is, guys, once you've secured the residency permit, so that carte de séjour, very, very often, unless you've done something crazy, like a terror attack, or I don't know, like you were involved into a robbery, or I don't know. I mean, most people then, once they've secured the carte de séjour,
yeah,
they just have to renew it. And the renewal, I mean, the more time goes, the easier it gets.
Because that picture's being painted, right, every year.
Exactly that. Yes.
Okay.
And the more they'll provide you with a longer-term, multi-years residency permit. Again, you have to remember, they decide. So I could be saying that, and you could end up having 1, 2, 3 renewals with just a 1 year's permit each time. It definitely happens. They decide. But the more it goes, the easier it gets. And again, worst case scenario, at the end of the day, we're talking about if you're just being renewed from 1 year each time.
Yeah.
Just that you have to go through that process often, but it doesn't change anything. No. You're still in France. It's just that you have a bit of a paperwork to achieve every year. But that's it.
It's interesting though, because as you're saying this, someone could potentially move over from the US or the UK, buy a property.
Yep. You don't even have to be a resident to buy. You can have no tie with France and buy a property in France.
But in this scenario, you can't rest on your laurels there. You should still apply for the Social Security. Otherwise, you're at risk.
I think we've made it on purpose. Resting on laurels sounds too Italian for us. and we have the Napoleon's legacy. So
this is true.
Sorry, Caesar. Sorry.
Right. That's a good point, though. Absolutely.
But joke aside, again, and actually, Nannie, I think will kind of testify about this whole thing, because even if it was a while ago, this is still, I mean, it's actually what's very interesting with Nannie. I mean, everything she went through as a US citizen is exactly the same process right now. The process the same. I mean, it did change for the Brits because of Brexit, but the Brits are not doing the same as the Americans. So it's the exact same process. And nothing changed. And actually, for you guys who are watching, I'm super jealous because obviously you can hear my French accent and a bit of a broken English, but Nannie and Ben, they speak French so fluently, I can barely pick up their accents. Everyone can make it, I mean, and I'm jealous about them, that because they're really bilingual.
Yeah, well, we can sneak in behind enemy lines, right, Nannie?
That's what I'm afraid of.
That's the trick. Yeah, Napoleon won't know what hit him. I think you mentioned before Italy. Anyway, but it's quite fun just to get a bit of perspective on who is joining us this evening, right? We're always interested to understand what the main reason is for you needing a French visa in the first place. So our moderator this evening, Marianne, just put up a poll up here, guys. If you could tell us exactly why this might be a requirement for you in the months and years to come, please do let us know. And as a trio, we'll do our best to tackle the main challenges or opportunities you might have based on your scenario.
Oh. It's interesting to see the results from the poll coming in, because it seems like the vast majority of you guys plan to retire to France. Which is actually, I mean, Nannie, Marianne, and I, who are dealing with, newcomers, and we're dealing, the vast majority of the time, the main reason for relocation, that's actually what the title for this on the visa application is what they call the main reason for the stay. And it's retire to France. So, they call it tourist, being a tourist, but tourism is like retire to France most of the time. So it's interesting. It's good to know about that, because perhaps we could for retirement could share a couple tips and tricks.
The stories on there, yeah. But I mean, it's very encouraging to see so many people still keen to retire to France, right? What a place to.
We can do two things. So for the British expats, I've mentioned about the S1 program, which is specific to being retired, but from a British perspective. But from the US expat or other expats, many people have asked us, planning to retire, but they're like, well, do we have to go back to the US to reapply for the visa after the 1 year, or to apply for the carte de séjour? Or, the good news, again, no. Unless something has changed, or unless they tell you to go back because you failed to do something like applying to the Social Security.
Sure.
The good news is for American expats or South Africans or Australians, same as the Brits, actually, you don't have to go back. Once you're in France, after your 1 year's visa, you can stay and remain in France. Okay. There is one issue that's kind of US specific, though, and I've quickly touched base on this, but it's the bank account.
Right.
A bank account creation as a US expat can be a challenge. Well, we do have people we can refer you to that can help you with this, but you'll find out this is probably very complex at first. So again, we can guide you in the right direction for free. But the Americans, because the US have a specific set of regulations towards Americans, and they require that, well, French and EU, but let's say French banks share your wealth and kind of all the revenue streams to the US, even if you're no longer a US citizen.
Yeah.
So this is kind of an extra burden for the French banks. So most of them are not happy having you around. Sorry, guys. But again, some are, and we can help you with that. Don't worry. It's just, this is the kind of thing you usually don't think about. It seems like it's a walk in the park to open a bank account. But don't worry, guys. We have solutions, and you will not end up paying more than any of the, like actually, you will not end up paying more than me, for example. So that's not a problem. It's just, well, there are only a couple of banks that can help you out. So, well, this is no secret. We'll help you find them out. Yeah.
It's a really good point, though, because without a French-based account, it's actually really hard to do anything else, right? Yeah, setting up utilities and.
I see the second most option is to work remotely. If I can perhaps share a couple of words about that, Ben?
Go for it. Yeah, please do.
It's actually very good because most of the time it's the same as the retired. You can work in France. So there is a bit of a gray area, but because there is no such thing as the digital nomad visa, or, well, not in the wording at least. There is, but it's not labeled this way. Same as there is no such thing as the investor visa. France is a bit weird about that. But you can use something called the visitor visa, which explicitly says you're not allowed to work in France. But this is when it gets super French specific and, well, typical. You're not allowed to work for a French company or with French clients or have any kind of activity in France. But if you're just working for a foreign-based company with foreign-based clients from France, then you're a remote worker, then you fit the bill. So then you have the same requirements as the one I mentioned before, and that's super easy to meet. Because still the three main pillars, same with us.
It's a big distinction, isn't it? Because it'd be very easy to generalize over that.
And it's a massive distinction because then if you do not meet, for example, if you're working for a French company or if the business you're working for do have activities in France, it's a completely different story for them and for you. So I won't get into the details as to what are the changes for them, but it's massive changes, and they'll basically end up with them paying French social taxes. So that would probably end up with them saying no to you. But if it's if you're working in France, if you want to have a French employment contract, you're planning to move to France to work in France or to set up a business in France, these are yet another two different categories. Working in France is super easy. Well, the difficult bit is to secure something called the promesse d'embauche. So you need to find an employer that issues a statement saying, I'll employ you, and then you can move across with what we call a work visa. This is one of the easiest to secure, but actually it's one of the hardest because you need to secure that promesse d'embauche first. And that's very difficult because you're competing with people which don't have the same kind of issue you will have. So from the employer's perspective, you come with liabilities. Sure. So, but if you do have that, then it's one of the easiest to get. Setting up a business, on the other hand, is kind of tricky. It's kind of tricky because you'll have to provide them. The proof of income doesn't exist with that. The proof of income is a business plan.
Right.
And a business plan, then you have to think French, is a non-standard document. You're forcing them to read something you write, and they don't like it because it's non-standard. So this is one of the visa which comes with the highest rejection rate. So if you intend to move to France to set up a business, I strongly suggest you work with immigration experts or lawyers, because this one is very, is kind of a sleepy road. Yeah.
That's interesting. So to get a visa, you're basically going on Dragon's Den, getting approval from your business plan. Wow.
And there is one that I like because sitting in in fifth position. I like this one to visit my second home in France. So it depends where you're from. Unfortunately, very bad news for you guys. A law was voted in the French Senate for the Brits that could move across and have a 5 years visa for France that could help them stay for up to 6 months a year in France if they had a property in France. It's been rejected by the French MPs. Sorry, guys.
It's brutal news.
I thought I paid them high enough, but apparently it was not enough.
Send a bigger envelope next time.
Sorry. I'll make sure we do it next time. But it doesn't change much. It's just that just know that you can stick with a 1 year's visa, the one I mentioned, and just keep on renewing it every year. So that's doable, completely doable. The only problem, so for the British expats, so British second home owners in that case, if you're American second home owners, if you're in Australia, whatever, this one is perfectly acceptable. There is a catch for some expats, like the one I have in mind, which we encounter very often, unfortunately, would be the American second home owners, which have bought, for example, because they have a property there, so they bought a car as well. The problem is, well, they're not a French permanent resident. So at the end of the day, they will not have a French driver license because they will not exchange their license. They want to keep the US license. So unless they also have a European license, at some point, they will no longer be allowed to drive in France, or if they are, no insurance company will want them on board because they do not have a compliant driver license, again, seeing from a French perspective. And you have to understand, this is not a problem about the legality of this, because if you just come like 3 months each year, you're legally allowed to drive your US license. It's a problem of the French insurers seeing you and your situation as not being permanent. And therefore, you should not be eligible for permanent insurance.
Oh, what a vicious cycle that is.
It is. So we also do have solutions for this. It's a very particular scheme we can set up. But obviously, as anything that's particular, it means it's a bit more pricey than the standard thing. So
sure,
just kind of small things that you need to consider, and more than happy to discuss the specifics of your situation with you guys at some point, or maybe she's doing it already. Marianne will share a link so that you can book a consultation with me later on, and I'll be happy to answer your specific questions. But yeah, just to remain a bit generic, but these are the issues to have in mind. Yeah.
Great overview, Fabien. Well done for that. And yeah, it's nice to see the variety of reasons why people are looking at France as a destination. Anyway, if we were to start getting a bit specific with stories here, I mean, Nannie, I'd like to bring you to the fold now. Your time to shine. Fabien mentioned applications to social security in France. Now, you as a US citizen coming over, you've got some really good perspective there, like compared to what you experienced back then, over 2 decades ago. What's the story now?
Well, you say 2 decades, so that means I'm old now. So
sorry. Yeah.
That's noted. No, but basically, I'm in exactly where. But in all of the viewers' shoes, I came to France in 1999. I had to get into the French healthcare system. It was over 20 years ago, so I don't remember being traumatized. I'm still here. I'm still alive.
Good.
So I got through it. And plus, when I came here, I was 7 months pregnant. So there was a little stress to add on, but it was a piece of cake, like you say.
As from the outside looking in, it's just like, firstly, really impressive to make that jump as you did.
And you have to remember that Nannie, well, not to be 20 years ago, for me as well, it's not that long ago. I want to specify this for the audience.
Yeah.
But so, Nannie, 20 years ago, I mean, France, basically COVID did a wonder to France because it helps. It kind of gave us kind of a kick in the, the rear end. So France has digitalized many of its processes. But Nannie, I mean, can you tell us what you went through Did you went through a website to apply?
No, I don't even remember having a computer or being able to log on when I arrived in France. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah, no, it was pen, paper, send it through the post office and just wait, or calling and waiting a long time because it's the French administration. So, yeah. And no, I did not have the technology that they do today. So that's really a good step. That's really a good, really good thing.
And even coming from that, a cultural background that's very different, having to go through the paper-based. I mean, guys, this is the worst. you don't understand how lucky you are to do it. I mean, this is really easy now compared to before. Because even if you did something wrong, when you receive an email or something like that, I mean, I don't know. I think you did it from the first year, didn't you?
Yes.
So, but she did manage to do that through snail mail. But so you would receive emails and stuff, telling you what's wrong. So she's the embodiment that, I mean, although I may have sound scary at times, you can see how easy. I mean, she did it without any kind of support, pen and paper based.
Yeah.
I mean, you can do it, guys. Yeah.
It's such a good point. And it's only got easier since then, thankfully. So that's the point, right? That's the point. I mean, but so to give people more perspective on it, over the time you have been in France, you've been in the French system. Have you had to? Well, what's the process? Once you're in, are you in, or what's the story there?
But like Fabien explained at the beginning, once you get into the French healthcare system, the next step will be getting the mutuelle, which is mandatory. And this is much cheaper than the private health insurance that you will need to get into to get the visa. So, yeah, that's basically the next step.
Right. Okay.
And when she say it's mandatory, just to get some perspective, it's not mandatory for all the French natives. But for example, let's forget she's an expat, but Nannie being a French employee, it's mandatory for all French employees as well. So it's not just you guys. So there are some categories in France which needs, I mean, they cannot not have a mutual. So for expats, you're part of these guys which do have that obligation. But that, as she was mentioning, usually it's 2-3 times, if not more, cheaper than the private medical insurance. So it really is cheap. And why you need to top it up? Even if this wasn't mandatory, everyone would advise. I mean, in France, everyone have a mutual, even without it being mandatory. Mm-hmm. There is a good reason, especially since Macron's new set of regulations, because we've created something called the 100% santé, which means if you have a mutual, you will always have an option that's 100% refunded, like no out-of-pocket expense. Even for dentistry, root canal, prosthesis, the glasses, whatever, you will always have an option for. So sure, if you want glasses with, Hugo Boss frames or, Dior, you will have some out-of-pocket expense. But the point is that you will be provided with at least one option that's for free. If you want to go for the fancy stuff, no problem. Then you pay out of pocket, but that's your choice.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a very important point because then you always have. Well, and it's a joke I like to make. When I'm saying no out-of-pocket expense, let's be honest, you do have because the government also wants to make sure you're not abusing the system. So there is a mandatory. Even the mutual is forbidden to refund everything. They have to deduct €1 from this. And we would riot for that.
Outrageous.
€1.
We would get your
we would riot for that €1. But sorry, guys, you will have €1 out of pocket.
That's a huge distinction there. And I can sort of imagine people listening going, okay, so it's so much cheaper to get this healthcare. Does that mean it's that much worse?
Well, the French system technically, this is why France has a very bad rep when it comes to taxes. Because actually, the national taxes in France, for most British and US expats, like the overwhelming majority, they end up paying less taxes in France, national taxes, than they were in their home country. Even you heard me, guys, even the US expats, because for example, if you're like a normal person, the tax brackets are lower, so you would end up paying less. If you're wealthy, we only tax properties in France. If you have 10 million sitting on a bank account, this is zero tax in France. So most of US and UK's expat end up paying less. I'm saying that because the bad rep of France being a super highly taxed country comes from the wages. Social charges on the payrolls are crazy. Like really crazy. It varies it depends if you're self-employed or not, but basically it varies from 60 to 100%. So if you're paying an employee 2,000 euros, for example, it's highly likely that you'll end up paying 2,000 euros in social charges. So 4,000 total. So that's where we get the bad rep. But so we're paying high social taxes because we have high social benefits. And for example, most of the non-EU expats will end up applying to the French social security system and get the French social security system for free. And if they don't, this is going to be a very small percentage. But even for the Americans, which never contributed, don't have post-Brexit agreements or that kind of stuff, if they have dividends, if they have dividend incomes, if they have some kind of revenues that's going to be taxed in France, they'll get the social security for free as well. And if not, they'll have to pay a very small percentage. I've never seen more than 1,000 a year for a US expat, just to say. So it's super cheap for everyone.
It's great perspective. And actually, I think if you sit back on some of the expat forums, you realise people are able to get seen by their doctors extremely quickly in France as opposed to other parts of the world. You get access to really high specialist treatment so fast. That's often the biggest pain point. And probably one that resonates with the big percentage of people that are on the call today. Nannie, actually, I wanted to come back to you on this. Aside from the issues mentioned before, what other things should, I suppose, particularly US residents considering France, what should people consider as another stumbling point around the social security?
Stumbling points, I don't really see what I had problems with when it came to the Social Security. Like I said, if I compare to the U.S., like you said, you were able to get to see doctors quickly, to see specialists quickly. The level of medical coverage is quite high in France. I must say that the doctors are much better. So no, I don't really see any stumbling points when it comes to the French healthcare system. Once you're in, I consider that we're very lucky for what we have compared to some other countries.
Not many people could say that, right?
No. And I think you told me a story, Nannie, about when you arrived, especially given your condition at the time. Your driver license from the US, you were from a state, maybe I can let you tell the story.
Yeah. So that's the only thing that really traumatized me because I'm from Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia. I love my state, but it's one of the states that do not exchange with the French permit. So I did have to start all over again with the driving lessons and passing the test. And it's not that easy. It's really not that easy, but I did make it on the first time, so it's okay.
I didn't. I had to go through it twice.
That's like, you deserve a medal, Nannie. I don't know many people. So because you have the COD to do, don't you? Like that takes ages, the theory stuff.
Plus, I've been driving since I was 16 years old. So you have bad habits when you start to drive, and then when you have to drive with a monitor next to you, and you're 23 years old, you forget a lot of the things that you're not supposed to do behind a wheel. But yeah, it was very. That's really the only thing that marked me as coming to France. But I did, I know I saw on the chat people asking questions, and just for information, when I went back to the States, I did pass my test again, and I do have both licenses. Don't know if that's something I could sell, but you can go back and pass your test and keep your old one.
Keep your old one. Now you're basically a James Bond, aren't you? Exactly.
Cool. But that's actually, unfortunately, that's the only way to have both licenses, because if you convert the license as per the word, they kind of tear the other one apart and then just have one. So if you go through the test on both countries, then you have both licenses, but otherwise you only keep the one. And also good news for you guys from the US hearing that, and that maybe I don't want to go. I mean, especially if you're in your 50s, 60s, you probably don't want to have to go through the test again. If it really comes to that, so in French big cities, they have English speaking test school, driving school that do exist. But again, if you can avoid that, that's probably for the better. And you have an option to, if you have family, friend, or I don't know, options to relocate to a different state that do have agreement with France, exchange agreement. We can share a link after. We'll send an email to you guys, and we can share the link where you can double check that if your state has agreement, for example. But so if you do have an option to kind of consider yourself in another state, as you probably are aware, after 3 months, you're eligible to exchange your current, I don't know, like Georgian license from Georgia, to, I don't know, like a New York license. And then if that license has an exchange program with France, then you can exchange it. And as the visa application will probably take 3 months anyway, and as you only need to exchange your license within the first year, and sometimes it's a bit of a pain, but it's just to say, it's just an example and just to highlight that what Nannie went through in some situation might be avoided. And as she was telling you, everything else was kind of, the walk. I mean, she's being too modest because she's saying it's a walk in the park.
Yeah.
But I mean, she's working with us, and I can tell you, she's doing admin stuff all day long. She's probably not like the average American girl. They probably don't go into that much bureaucracy, but still she did it. She's not traumatized, and she did it all on her own without being French, just freshly arrived, without knowing anything about the French bureaucracy or government or the way of doing things, and she did it. So especially if you have assistance, hand-holding support, or even better, you're working with an immigration expert or lawyer, we can help you with all of that, so that would be even easier for you.
I mean, beautifully covered, guys. It's really good to get real hardcore stories, straight from you there, Nannie, as well. I mean, quite interested to ask the people who've patiently been waiting for us to answer their questions anyway. But, we've spoken about the visa stuff. We've spoken about healthcare. We've spoken about taxes a little bit and, how those things play in. So I'm going to ask Marianne our moderator again, to bring up the next poll, just to understand, what's the biggest concern? What's one of the main things keeping people from starting the application to move to France? There we go. Wow, this leaderboard's changing rapidly, isn't it? So, Fabien, the securing permanent residency is a strong one, right?
Competition is fierce, yeah. Yeah, we can see. Okay, securing permanent residence. So either you did listen properly to this, or your concerns are legit. But you're right. But again, don't worry, guys. Especially from countries such as the US, the UK, and we're mostly dealing with English-speaking countries, to be honest. I mean, obviously, the people we're working with, that's. I mean, it's important to say that we have 100% acceptance rate. So I would not be too worried about that. Sure, it's going to be some paperwork is going to be involved eventually down the way, but I'm confident everyone can make it. And securing the permanent residency, if you've made sure, then your visa application process was made using something that's you didn't cheat, basically, with your visa application. Then the residency application, then going through that permanent kind of carte de séjour, or at least the document that you can renew and basically be French, would be much easier. And just as a quick tip as well, like the main difference between a residency permit and a visa, the visa is definitely a temporary stuff because it's a stamp in your passport, basically. Okay, same thing as when you travel, for example, to France. they stamp your passport. The visa is the same thing, a bit fancier, but it's the same thing. A carte de séjour, this is like an ID card or a driver license card. It's an actual card, and it's exactly like an ID card. So once you get that card, then you're good. Even if you just have the 1 year's permit, then it's just about renewing. I mean, if you have to renew your passport, you're not worried. That's basically the same. So the first year's visa, first year's residency, so that card, are the two biggest challenges. But if you've planned ahead properly, they both are walk in the park. And again, you have to consider that the second one, the residency permit, you have to process to go through that while in France. And again, you're in France. When was the last time you've heard that an American or a British guy was exiled from France, on handcuffs because his residency application was not properly filled in? So, okay, guys, so it never happens. So it's just, obviously, there can be a pain. You could be fined if you don't do things the right way or in the right order, or they can tell you to go back to reapply for another visa because you didn't do. It's more like this, actually. If you work with professionals or if you really plan ahead properly, you will just avoid fines, well, obviously, and trouble. But at the end of the day, almost everyone makes it. I'm saying almost just to be cautious. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, everyone makes it.
Yeah.
Well, unless you died because you've had too much wine.
That's the risk of these things.
We should be cautious with that, these guys.
No, quite. Anything can happen. I'm just bringing. I think now would be a good time to bring some of the other questions coming through on here. Past that, just give us a bit of a chance to cover them.
Sure. So, you've been asking a lot of questions.
Yeah, it's been very busy on here. It is an interesting one because obviously since COVID, this has opened things up, remote employment and the implications of that.
Yeah. So remote employment. I've touched base on this topic. So it's exactly, so if you have like a remote contract, like your remote worker, it depends on what your company is doing. So if your company is involved with France one way or another, with French clients, or if your if your job involves you working with French clients or working through France, like physically, attending events or whatever, this is different. So, then get back in touch because then it gets a bit specific. But unless your company is involved with France, then you can come to France with kind of the equivalent of a digital nomad visa, which in your case is probably going to be the visitor visa. And then you can work and be in France as a remote worker. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. Just get some upvotes. Which French banks work with Americans? I mean, you covered that initially, but you didn't give any names.
Yeah.
So some secret source.
Yeah. No. Well, I mean, Ben, you're aware of the most prominent bank for US expat. And actually you have I suppose an interesting tip to share, because depending on who you're working, I would say with or through, the guys that's actually pinpointing you, the bank, will change whatever you're accepted or not. But then you know the bank, don't you?
Yeah. So, I mean, the most prominent one for US would be BNP Paribas, right? And the journey you go on there, you can make an application online and see where that takes you.
But depending on who referred you to that bank, because for example, we are sending them so much business, and they're much more flexible with us. They're like, oh, this is a client from FAB, and therefore we've had clients which have been denied when they went directly
on their own. Yeah, it's a really interesting. It's a bit of a political play, but if they'll try.
Yes.
Yeah. They sort of want to make sure they can sell all kinds of products to you in advance, right? Before. Yeah,
that's also why. Yeah, no, exactly. But and to be honest, BNP is a very, very good bank anyway. It's not.
Yeah,
you don't have a choice and you end up with them. They're a very good bank anyway, so you're not in a bad spot.
I mean, the pro tip there is because they're maybe not the cheapest though. So you can start your application with them, and then once you progress with your visa and you move to France, you can then switch to a challenger bank
Eventually,
in France. Yeah, which is a good way to reduce the costs.
Marian referred a question about do you need to buy and pay for your health cover before applying for the visa? It's actually a very good question because
good question.
Yes, actually, I didn't even mention this, but part of the visa application process that you're doing from your own country, okay, involves a physical, like an in-person interview, and you have to go through that interview. And when you go there in person, you have to have all the paperwork. So you have to have the proof of ownership, considering you have a property, for example, or the copy of the lease agreement. You have to have the copy of the bank statements if you're using proof of savings. And you have to have the certificate of insurance and the proof of full payment. This is the wording they use, the visa center. So you have to have that documentation, which imply you have to have bought and started a policy beforehand. Otherwise, they'll tell you, oh, the application is incomplete. So you need to have that, to have sourced that before. And well, the good news is, again, there are plenty of, we're an insurance brokerage company as well. So we can compare it, various insurance providers and help you with this. And most of the time, we will be able to amend the start date, even if you need to postpone it, or because they've asked for more documentation, or again, refund you should the visa application be denied, even if it's not because of the insurance policy. So when we're working with guys who knows, we've done it plenty of times, usually it's easy, but make sure you do source that early, like at least like a month earlier is fantastic, leaves you time. And if you have medical conditions and wants to make sure you're on the safe side, I would advise 2 or 3 months ahead is probably best, just in case you want to have to go through a medical questionnaire and assessment. Just leave some room for this.
Great shout. Again, it's the theme of planning comes up a lot, right?
A question which is British specific as well, just because I'm thinking about it, about insurance. There is a specific, the 6-month visa has the same requirements, but with the 6-month visa, you can use the former EEC, which is not the GEEC in the UK. You can use that instead of private medical insurance. For everyone else, guys, this is going to be private health insurance, like for the 12-month visa. But it's only for the 6-month visa. I insist on that. The GEEC is only for the 6-month visa. It's non-compliant for any other visa. So I repeat, GEEC is non-compliant for the long stay 12-month visa, the only one that's renewable. Travel insurance is not compliant. Schengen policies aren't compliant, even if it's a Schengen visa you're applying for. Okay, this is an almost automatic rejection. And this is also like kind of a living thing, because the guy behind the desk is checking boxes. So don't be misled by stories. A guy said, okay, I've used an hotel for my visa application and I succeeded. Sometimes you're lucky, you slip through the cracks. Doesn't mean this is the right way to do it. So then it's up to you to wonder, okay, do I want to make sure I can get through, or do I want to jeopardize my potential visa? Because if you're really rejected, though, if you're being caught trying to do something that you shouldn't be doing, then you can head up with a hard rejection, which does happen. I'm saying it's not often, but obviously if you're trying to cheat the system, it could happen. And if it does happen, then there is a cool-off period. You cannot reapply straight away.
Oh, blimey. Okay.
Well, to be honest, this is fair. If you've tried.
It's for sure. Yeah, for sure. There should be some penalty attached to it. There's a good question here from Alexander, actually, when talking about compliance. People opening a joint account in France, bank account, and they have money in that account. Would that count towards savings and meeting that minimum requirement? It would. Yeah,
exactly. So again, like I was saying, I'm just running up numbers to make the math easy, but you take minimum wage, so 1,400. Multiply that by 12, you have the equivalent you need to have in savings. Take a bit of a margin. So again, 20,000 is probably going to be better, or even more if you have. And then you just had 30% per dependent, which includes the spouse. And if you're moving with child, then you had 30% per child. Okay. Also, if you're going with income, sometimes you're retired, you have a pension. Well, let's say the lady is making like 5,000. Well, I'm being overly optimistic, but anyway, let's say she is making 5,000 a month. Okay, with a pension is 5,000 a month, and let's say the husband only has a pension of like, I don't know, 500 a month, even if it's in USD, it doesn't matter. Well, then the woman alone can use her income for the couple, because they're still applying as a couple. Okay.
Gotcha.
So it doesn't matter where the money comes from, if it's in a joint bank account or sitting on 2 different accounts, as long as the money is under your name, whatever this is, income or savings. If it's someone else's bank account, even if that's your father or uncle or whatever, doesn't work. It needs to be your name, your account, or your revenue stream. But they'll be happy with it, even if that's a family and it's only one person providing for the whole family. They'll be happy with that. Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. Okay. Well, look, I mean, we've covered some great topics here, and we've got so many more questions to get through. I think we'll do our best to reach out individually after this and answer best we can. But you guys have stuck with us for well over an hour, so thank you very much for that. And hopefully you found this super insightful. Fabien, anything you wanted to add there? Nannie, anything?
Well, just don't worry, guys. To be fair, this was our first webinar, and we've been a bit overwhelmed. We were not expecting all the love. Thank you again. Thank you for being with us. Really appreciate this. But therefore, you've asked tons of questions, and we really appreciate this. Don't worry, we'll get back in touch with you guys. Maybe not straight away because you asked a lot of questions, but we'll answer each and every questions. You also have the option to book a consultation with me and the team. So Marianne and Nannie, part of the team, so you can book a consultation with us, and we'll be happy to help you as well. Consultations are for free, by the way. So yeah, this is basically it. But thank you again for all your support and for being there.
Huge thank you, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.